Hello and welcome to Hello Governor, the podcast. As always, I am Abdullah, and my guest today is Talon Warburton. How you doing, Talon?
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I gotta start with the obvious one. Talon, where did that name
Yes.
come from?
My real father was a bird, actually. No, kind of not that far off from the truth ish. When my mom was pregnant with me, they were camping in Big Bear, and as the story, goes, they told me, I guess an owl was overhead, and my dad's like, "Oh, it'd be a really cool name, Talon." Mom's like, "Yeah, that would be a cool name," and then it stuck. I wouldn't be surprised if there was any the devil's lettuce involved in that that naming ceremony, but that's where it comes from.
Because I remember like a couple years ago when you did Guardians of the Galaxy, and I remember hearing you for the first time. You made your debut as what's his face, Champion of the Universe. I forget the character's name, but he was on
Tryco, yes.
Tryco, and I was like the entire time I was watching that episode, I was like, why is this dude doing like a really bad Patrick Warburton impression? And then I look up your and then I look up your name, and I'm like, no way, ain't no freaking way.
Now listen here. I think that was a pretty decent Patrick Warburton, but it's gotten better over time. Um, it was funny because the breakdown for that audition, that was my first like big voiceover part. Actually, was Tryco in Guardians of the Galaxy, the animated series, and the breakdown for him description was Patrick Warburton if he was an evil professional wrestler, and I'm like, well, I could probably do that. I could probably do that. And over the years I've had it's funny though, I've gotten probably a couple dozen breakdowns with him as the character type, which is kind of odd. And I think that's the only one I've actually booked. So there's somebody out there who's doing a better Patrick Warburton than me, and I got to find this guy. This cannot stand.
I mean, well, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't figured it out yet. You are, of course, the biological son of Mr. Patrick Warburton, and spoilers. I'm sorry if that's a shocking revelation to some people, but oh well. But
I'm sorry for dropping the bomb so early, guys. I apologize.
but I was like really surprised by that because I'm like, well, if they wanted Patrick Warburton, why they go to Patrick Warburton? But then it's like, well, you didn't want to do it for obvious reasons, but I don't know. Maybe it's like, eh.
Well, that's a good question, actually, and you'll find that it's not necessarily a lot of the times the people casting these, there's so many different moving parts that goes into anything that's animated or even on camera too. And often they don't know what they want until they hear it. They have kind of an idea. So sometimes you'll get like the worst are commercial auditions. The range is insane. It's crazy broad. But like we want a Patrick Warburton type. So I'm like that's the route that I went. But the obvious reason is yes, I'm quite a bit cheaper than my father. I'll do a job for a gas station hot dog and half a Slurpee, and his rate's quite a bit higher. But
Now, being the son of a titan of the industry, how much did that play into wanting to into your acting journey? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it just something you stumbled across?
yes and no. I was afraid to do acting for most of my life. I didn't start acting until like end of college. I changed my degree three times. I think I started off like communications, then international relations, then I decided I hated politics. And then I'm like, well, I'll just do business because I need to graduate with a degree I've spent this long. And then I ended up as an actor. That's how it works. But I was just always afraid. I'm like, everybody's gonna think I'm like a poser, just nepo baby, or like uh, and there is definitely benefits. I'll get into that in a second. But it's just like he's always been nothing but supportive, no matter what any of his kids have wanted to do, what any of his kids wanted to do, and he was very inspiring as a kid. I was able to see the joy that he brought others, the art that he was able to create, his own unique perspective. And it was very much like, yeah, I'd like to try this myself, So I guess I hope that kind of answers the question. Yes, he was a guiding force in that, but I didn't decide to take the reins in that element of my life until college, after college.
So it wasn't like something you always wanted to pursue. It was just something you fell into after you realized, hey, you know what? Everything else sucks. I'll just do what my dad does for a living.
No, 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 no. It's like nothing felt right. I knew there was something wrong, like I was trying to do a lot of things, but like none of those shoes were fitting. You know what I'm saying? And it's like I've always been a storyteller. I mean, you could probably tell I'm a pretty gosh darn big nerd, and I'm like, well, what's excited me about those universes, and it's these animated series like shows like Dragon Ball and the Justice League animated series, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, all those shows growing up. I binged those and like, Crocodile Hunter and like, Discovery Channel specials and like History Channel specials when I was growing up. That was all the stuff that I watched. That's what made me the happiest. That's what made me the most excited, to play make believe as a kid. But I always thought I would never be good enough for that. I talked myself out of it for most of my life. I didn't even allow myself to go that far until I decided, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? People could just say no, but I'd rather be true to myself. So that was it was not like oh, screw this. It was like I'm like I got to do it. I got to do it. If I'm not going to do it now, it's now or never. So I got to try.
And what do you love and hate about what you do?
Well, I love there's many things I love. That's a big question. I think there's kind of like I think there's an innately human desire for legacy. Art is in essence immortal as long as it persists, and to have the privilege to be able to contribute to art in any capacity, that can exist. The stories that I can tell will exist after I'm gone, as long as they keep airing. I mean, ultimately, that's a bit of an extension on, your time and the human memory. That's one element. Two, I was able to see the joy, like I said, my father was able to bring to people, when people talked to him, like, he's always been very kind when fans have approached him, uh, to see the sheer happiness that his work has brought them. I love making people happy. If I have an ability to do that, if I could make a job out of that by creating, that's the dream right there. And as a huge nerd too, it's to be able to be a part of, like Marvel, to be able to join these universes that inspired me, these larger than life universes, hopefully Warhammer someday, you know, to be able to do that, to have that avenue open is just the greatest blessing. There's I mean, we can get into it as well in a little bit. I mean, there's definitely you have to prepare yourself for a lot of rejection, but when you do book, it's an amazing feeling, unlike any other, to be able to be invited to be a part of any project like this. Sorry.
And when you did Guardians, because I know that that was your first ever role,
Mhm.
it was your debut into voiceover. Did you guys record together on that, or was that recorded separately?
We did. When I walked into the room, there was James Arnold Taylor, Fred Tatasciore. I think Troy Baker was on that session as well, Eric Bauza, and my one of my voice acting teachers and now one of my dearest friends, David Sobolov. We were so he was Drax. I was our episode on that one. And I'm looking around, I'm like, you're a voice of my childhood, you're a voice of my childhood, and I'm this new guy. It's like, well, I don't deserve to be standing here. So it's just like I just better give it my all, give it my all, but like, so that for my first real on camera, or voice acting session, we were all in the same room, and that really hasn't happened a whole lot since then, especially post COVID. Maybe once or twice, and one of those was for a commercial that I did. So much of it's individual now, which is really sad. It really sucks that that's the case, but um, that was a really surreal experience.
And what was your biggest takeaway from that session? Because you're working with, like you said, you're the new guy coming in, and there's these all these like legends of the business like in that room, and you're like, oh man, I better like not screw this up.
Yeah, my first takeaway was legends get notes too. Like they don't do it perfectly every time. You think that, the final product you hear is the first one that gets out, but we're all sculpting and trying to, create these characters, and it's about collaborative effort with the director. And seeing all of them do that, and they're like, "No, I don't really like that. Let's start," or phrase differently. Let's try it this way. Made me realize I'm like, okay, so we are in a similar boat. I still wanted to put my best foot forward, but I kind of had this expectation that they would just have it first time every time, because they had been doing this long, and they are legends, absolute legends. But everybody was super kind, super humble, and just very malleable. It was such a collaborative, creative effort in there, which was refreshing and encouraging. It made me feel comfortable, like, when I got notes or if I made a mistake, because everybody was getting notes. It doesn't matter, how long they've been doing this. It was a team effort.
And do you watch any of the stuff you work on, or can you not stand watching and listening to yourself?
Oh, I love it. It's so much fun. It's really it's kind of a crazy. Well, not I haven't done it with everything, but like certain things, like Tokyo Override. That was something I did recently on Netflix, and I'm really proud of that one. I really love Hugo in that. I'm currently playing Honkai Star Rail. I'm trying to get farther along in that, and eventually, hopefully, be able to get my character when he reruns. Because I missed the boat on that one. That's a whole separate thing. I don't know if we're talking about that or not. But I haven't seen when I did, Megamind. I watched the movie and I really enjoyed that. I haven't seen a whole lot of the animated series, so I got to go through that as well. But now that I have a little baby, my time is very limited, so I have to be um, specific how I consume my time. But I do enjoy, for the most, yeah, I do enjoy watching my stuff. It does put a smile on my face, and I feel a lot of gratitude in my heart when I do see that. I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky to be able to do what I do.
That's funny you say that because every time I ask people that question, they're like, I can't stand listening to myself. I'm too hypercritical.
Well, maybe I'm a narcissist. I hope not. I just I play a lot of D&D, so we're doing voices all the time and crafting these worlds. It's just to be able to see. I'm like, oh look, I'm able to be a part of this universe. It's just like I'm just like, oh, I'm so lucky and grateful to be able to do that. That's the feeling.
And how did you take to dubbing? Was that easy or was that hard?
It was harder than prelay. Timing is very important. I think it gives me a tremendous amount of respect for people that do primarily dubbing, because not only do you have to match the flaps, but you have to match the emotional intensity, no matter what it may be, and condense it, but keep it genuine within that window. It was definitely it's very difficult. It's very difficult. But I enjoy it because also, as a huge nerd, I've been, watching a lot of anime in the mornings when that's my shift with the baby. Binging One Piece right now on episode 200,655. There's a lot, but yeah, dubbing is a whole different animal.
Because like you said, you came from like you did prelay first and then you went to dubbing
Mhm.
afterwards. But most people like do cut their teeth on anime first and then they go to prelay. But so like, do you think that there was much of a difference going in reverse, as they say, or was it not much of a difference?
There's you make a good point. There are two different there's different bubbles at Hollywood. There's different bubbles in Hollywood, and even within animation, there is dubbing and prelay, and there can often be like a little bit of like elitism within both. If you're in dubbing, you want to get into prelay. The pay is much better. It just is. I mean, that's objectively, and a lot of stuff in dubbing is non-union, so you don't get access to residuals. It's so that's a whole other thing. And on camera, I mean, I hope we have a chance to talk about that as well. That's its own big bubble. To quote one of my acting teachers, this business is neither linear nor a meritocracy. It's everybody's got a different timeline. It's not necessarily fair. Some people have, more advantages than others, but everybody's path is different. You don't just like, there's no set path to follow. Like the way that I got into more dubbing projects, for example, so like the way that I got into dubbing specifically was I took an on-camera acting class, and one of my scene partners or my classmates was Ryan Colt Levy, and he's Chainsaw Man. He exploded a few years ago, I think, with like My Hero Academia and some other stuff, and now he's one of the biggest names in anime. But before any of that, we were in an on-camera class together, and we became very good friends, and we are still very good friends to this day. After he exploded, after a couple years, he's like, "Hey, I have a friend that I think you'd really like. You'd really like. You guys both work out. You're both nerds, and that was my and now one of my dearest friends in life, Bill Butts. So I saw him on Twitter, and he does all he's everywhere. In anime, one of the best big scary villain creature guys around. So I slipped into his DMs. I'm like, hey, Ryan says you're cool. We should work out. And he's like, my man, let's go. So we started working out together. He invited me to work out with some of his friends, some of whom were like casting people on various dubbing projects and games. And then I spent a lot of time just becoming friends with those people. And then eventually, when I'm like, I guess this is now the appropriate time. Like, do you have space on your casting roster? You know, and they said yes. And so, but you know, nothing's offered. You still have to audition. But so much of this business is networking. You just kind of have to get out there. So like that was something that was from my own volition rather than like the prelay element. Like the prelay element I got, I'd say thanks to my father opened the door for me into his agency, SBB. And they took me on when I was very green and I had no business being there. They're like, okay, if we're going to represent you, we need you to take X, Y, and Z classes and build up your skills for a while before we start sending you out for things. So I did. That was, but like I was still taken on because of him. That was a door that he opened up, and that was an advantage that I have that I'm eternally grateful for. But like the dubbing element, that's something that I had to craft on my own because he doesn't really touch that world. That's not something that has enveloped him, so to speak. I think I went on a bit of a tangent, but I hopefully answered your question.
I mean, long story short, it's basically like, you got to network because networking, I feel like, is not talked about enough in this business. And I feel like that's another whole thing that people just overlook because people think, oh, if I can just audition enough, they'll hire me. It's like, yes, but
No,
sometimes it pays to know people. Trust me. Trust me.
it does. But here's the thing that people need to understand, though. You need to lead by being genuine first. Networking will not work unless you're seeking to build genuine friendships, true friendships, where even if you don't get anything out of it, if they can't provide an opportunity for you, you still want to keep that friendship. It's like people can sense it's okay to be hungry in this industry, but you can't be thirsty. People can sense a million miles away when it's like, give me, give me, give me. What can you do for me? What can you do for me? You got to lead with, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Can we just be friends? Can we just hang out? And it might work, it might not. It has to be real, though. It has to come from a real point of just like, I want to just have a friend relationship with you. And some relationships will pan out, some won't. It's very hard, but you can see it, especially like, you go to, if you take enough classes, you can very quickly see the people who have the energy that I am describing to you that you do not want to be a part of. That's something you have to be very careful in navigating. But yeah, networking is key because people want to work with their friends. And what you have to understand is, when they receive these auditions, especially for like big name projects, everybody's good. Everybody's good that they're hearing. They have to just figure out what's that missing piece. What makes this one special? What makes this one fit the piece? And sometimes there's factors that are out of control. Like, well, they might like this person more. They can trust this person. They've worked with this person before. Or they want to give this person a chance because they are a friend, and it sucks. But that's literally every industry. Is like people want to help their friends. So you absolutely need to network. You absolutely need to network.
Yeah, because nothing is ever going to be given to you on a silver platter. That's just how
No,
life works.
100%.
And speaking of like, because you've been around, you've pretty much known you pretty much know all most of the people who do dubbing. Like, and now that you've done more dubbing projects, is that something you want to continue pursuing, or is it like just not gonna be the main thing?
Oh, well, I'm very greedy. I want it all. I love like this. I'd love to be involved in Dragon Ball in any capacity at some point. I love those. Anime is awesome because it's so well. There's such a range. There's such a range of different animes out there, and I continue to watch to this day. So yes, I would love to continue working on dubbing. And the fans are wonderful. They're very passionate for a lot of these dubbing projects. And, I've just started getting invited to cons for the first time, thanks to Argenti from Honkai. And that's been an amazing opportunity. And just, you see people dressing up as your character, which is kind of surreal and kind of crazy. And that allows me to, fill that desire of mine. Like I get to see, and I've gotten very sweet letters and notes from people about the role that he's played, like how he's motivated them and like how he's helped them, like his mentality's helped them through dark times. you don't get that with every kind of project, and there's so much passion and heightened emotions in the realm of dubbing and anime. So yes, I would love to continue that. I want to do dubbing, I want to do prelay, and I want to do on camera as well. I'm trying to do. I am doing those, but I'm in different stages of my journey for all those, so I don't see myself stopping dubbing at any time in the near future.
Speaking of your on-camera work, like I know that you did a couple of on-camera things, and like how was that? How was that experience for you? Because that's a whole different world as opposed to animation.
It is, it is. And am I talking too much? I hope I'm not. I kind of get on tangents
No, no, trust me, dude. You're nothing compared to me. Like me, dude. Like,
sometimes.
because I text with Corey Burton like constantly every day now, and we go
Yeah.
back and forth constantly. We just like ranting and raving about stuff. It's fine.
Well, I get on tangents, so you're getting another one right now for on camera. So, like I said, there's two bubbles. There's two bubbles, like I'll just say. So there's on camera, and there's VO. And even with VO, there's people that focus more on interactive. There's motion capture. It's kind of like a Venn diagram with like those different crossovers. I think it's a Venn diagram with the circles. Um, um, there is, if you talk to, it's very interesting. If you talk to enough voice people, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before. There's a little bit of elitism from on camera towards voice that you'll often find. Everybody has a horror story where, one of my peers that shall remain nameless. I don't know if they want to share this story. They were on a panel, and there was a very well established on camera actor on the same panel. And this is one of the biggest names in dubbing. And that person, the on camera, went to her and she's like, "Oh, well, I guess you guys are kind of actors too." And it's just like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, we absolutely are. I've always equated one medium. One is painting with oils, the other is painting with watercolors. Very similar skill set, but you can't just hop in from one to the other, and it's gonna look a little bit clunky because you don't have all the tools or the skills. On camera, you're on set. There's so many more moving parts. You are interacting with other people. You got your wardrobe on. The days are a lot longer. I mean, with voiceover, you go in, it's a couple hours, 4 hours max. You're in, you're out, boom. But it requires a lot of imagination. You have to be able to create that world in that booth with just a mic and foam and a glass and somebody, pushing a button on a computer. And you have to be able to fill that with all the real emotion and passion that brings people to these video games and these cartoons and inspires them. On camera, so I do think on camera is harder because there are so many more moving parts. And this industry is very pay to play. If you're not routinely working on camera, how do you keep that muscle toned, so to speak? With voiceover, the volume of auditions, in my experience, is I get them every week. I'm very fortunate to be able to do so, but you get a lot more. There's so many more voice acting auditions coming out in different medias, commercial, dubbing, prelay, independent projects. Like, you get to a point where you're doing multiple a week, at the very least. On camera, it's not the same. So what do you do to keep that muscle toned? You have to go to class. You have to pay for class. Classes aren't cheap. You have to drive to class. Classes are long. Classes in Hollywood are like, what, 4 hours usually, minimum? That doesn't include the rehearsal time that you have to do with your scene partners. You have to set time aside. If you're not going to do it Zoom, you have to do it in person. You have to memorize your lines. It's a slog. It's a slog. And it's a numbers game for auditions too. One of my other voice acting teachers, and I'd maintain this ratio. She's like, if you book 1 out of 100 auditions, that's a very good ratio. It's a very good ratio. I don't think it's that dissimilar to on camera. I really don't, and then you have to, and then you have to pay for casting director workshops, which are not an opportunity, but you're paying for FaceTime, and people know that. People understand that. They're not supposed to cast out of those classes. So I think I've been able to thrive in voiceover because they are my people. We are all nerds. We're all into the same shit, and we're very kindred spirits. Not as much the same on camera. I mean, I think I put a lot of energy into on camera. I've gotten very close to a few big projects. I've been requested for a few major sitcoms, that I've read for like lead parts, and I've gotten callbacks for those, and I've been shortlisted for some, it's like stuff filming in Australia, and I feel very grateful for those opportunities. So I think it's kind of a waiting game, but it's I'm at a different part on my journey for that one. It's like, so what do I do? How do I solve that problem? Like, what do I have to create myself? What relationships do I have to cultivate? are there any other classes I have to take? It's a whole separate ballgame. It's a whole separate ballgame. I think it's incredibly rewarding, but if I ever want to be able to put on Space Marine armor and be a part of that new Amazon show, I gotta keep at it.
You got to build up that resume, but building up a resume is just really difficult, especially nowadays when people have just short attention spans and they're like, if you don't impress someone in the first 5 seconds, you're done.
Yeah, you're toast. It's very hard, and there is a stigma, like I mentioned as well. People do see. I'm not making excuses. I'm not making excuses. Acting it's just hard. It's hard in general. But there is a stigma. It's like, okay, if somebody has done 90% voice work, is like, can they do on camera? Because a lot of the people that are doing the casting aren't necessarily, they're more business people, not always. The more business people, like how many followers do they have? Like what's their draw going to be in that? Well, if they're only doing voice acting, then they probably can't do on camera. So let's go with this other person when that's not necessarily the case. There's factors that are just out of your control. How do you fight that? You have to make your own stuff. And that's something I'm kind of working on right now. I am working on right now. I got some stuff in the mix for that. But it's a weird one. It's a weird one to navigate.
Yeah, and sometimes the work dries up and you're like, well, how am I going to get noticed? Well, you got to just make your own shit and hope that someone notices it, that someone likes enough to be like, "Hey, I like this guy in this one thing. Can we get in touch with him for whatever?" Because that happens. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. There are stories where people get discovered because they did like an indie project a couple years ago and someone saw it and they're like, "I like this guy. Can we get him on the show?" Cool.
One of the leads for Succession, he did a play in Chicago. I forgot which one it was, but and then the director notices like, I need him for something. So like, I forgot which one. I think it was the guy who plays Kendall. I think that's his name. I haven't actually seen the show. I need to watch it. But yeah, you never know. You never know. One of my coolest projects that I have not been able to announce yet. It's voiceover, but I did not have to audition for it because the casting director remembered me from something else that I auditioned for, and they're like, "Would you like to do this?" I'm like, "I super would. Thank you very much." Because people remember you. They remember. They're like, they might not be right for this, but I'm going to keep a mental note. They might be right for something else. So I can personally say that does happen. That's only happened to me once, but I'm very grateful that it did happen. Neither linear nor meritocracy. It's a weird business. Business.
And how do you balance your work and personal life?
You don't. Oh, no. Every day is different. That's one of the things I like about it. I don't think I could handle a desk job. It's like some weeks are crazy. And things are different now that I have a kid, so I have to be a little bit more picky. There's certain things that I have had to turn down. Like I was offered a role in a play that I really wanted to do, but it's the opening night is like in a week, and like I would have been doing multiple 4-hour rehearsals in a week, and when you have like a 2-month-old or a 3-month-old, that's just not going to happen. I've never been offered a lead role in a play before, but I had to turn it down because I'm like, there's no way. Like it was going to be for a fest like the Fringe Festival in Hollywood. Um, uh, I would be doing it for the chance of exposure. That's why I'd be doing it. You don't do plays, to make a lot of money. Even on Broadway, like that's a whole separate thing as well. They do make money. But like local theater in like Los Angeles, you're not doing that to make bank. You're doing it because you love the craft and you're doing it for exposure. I just wouldn't have had the energy for it. And that ended up being the right move, because our baby is wonderful, but he's been a little bit difficult. It's just like, so that's a sacrifice you have to make. My social life dried up for a while, kind of figuring out how to do stuff digitally, like playing Magic the Gathering via, Discord and all that stuff, and like, tabletop simulator. You have to cut, you have to come up with arrangements with your partner. It's like, okay, I need these hours of the day, we need these, and we want these ones together. It's a lot of scheduling and trying to keep to it, but understanding that life needs to be flexible. Having a supportive partner is key. My wife she's also a creative. She's written, I think, 5. She's on her 5th, novels. So she understands, the creative element, but she's in an entirely separate, world, and she's been a great support, great, fantastic mom to our little one. Um, you have to be flexible. You can't be rigid. You have to make a system, but be okay with changing that system on the fly. I guess that's how I would say make that balance and make sure you schedule in time for yourself. Like I need to schedule in time to do like painting and maybe once or twice a week try to do something online with my friends. That's the most I can manage. But you got to do that. You got to fill that. You got to fill that part of your soul.
And speaking of painting little things, let's get into Warhammer. Like, how did that whole thing start? Like, when did your obsession with this start?
Trying to remember specifically, I have a good friend, my best buddies in the world, and he introduced me to that world, and I went hard. I've only been into it for a couple years, but I went hard into it. I didn't like, as soon as I started, I think he told me a little bit about it, and I started watching lore videos. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is so brutal. This is awesome. It's like knights and space and demons and armor and like chainswords and giant robots and fighting the devils and it was so ridiculous and over the top but still grounded. I don't know. It hit everything that I ever wanted and I just started binging video after video and then I started reading the books. I'm like, God, I wish I didn't watch all those videos because now I've spoiled a lot of this for myself. I've always been an artist. Well, at least as long as I can remember. But I changed my medium to the miniature painting because the models were so cool. So I became like the kind of fan that I was. I read the books, I listened to lore videos, and I didn't really play the game. I wanted to paint these because I thought the painting is my meditation. It's one of the few things that quiets my brain down these days. It's just painting because you got to focus on it. So I can sit down for an hour or two and it's like play some music, maybe light a little bit of incense, drink some tea, and just decompress. Yeah.
And how long does it usually take you to paint an entire set?
Well, I mean that varies. I used to when I wanted to try playing man. Well, if I sit down and do it, I could probably do it in about a week for like a set, or like a little combat patrol if I'm like focused. But like that big model up there that I showed you, the Warlord Titan, that took about 5 months. To build and paint, like still living life, that was a process. It varies, Now that I'm not as interested in playing and not like completing the set, I just paint the models that I want to paint. There's one that I'm working on right now. It's one of the Primarchs, and I've been working on him for like a couple months, because I take what time that I can, paint a couple hours. I'm trying to paint it to a higher standard. There's quick ways to paint, and there's not so quick ways to paint. And there's quick ways to paint that look good and quick ways to paint that look okay and then but the ways to and then there's like if you want to paint non-metallic metals, if you want to use no metallic paints at all and try to replicate by tricking the eye the metallic effect, that takes a lot of skill and I'm still learning that skill but that takes a lot of time. It really varies. I can finish a model in a day and make it look pretty decent with like fast techniques for like one model. It varies, or take a very long time and then be unhappy with it and paint it over and do it again.
Oh God, I can't imagine doing that. Like I'm someone who struggles doing like one thing and being like, "Oh, you gotta do it again." No, screw that.
Well, I have this growing. It's called. And do you paint? Are you in the hobby as well?
No, no, God, no. Oh God, I don't hate myself that much, Talon. I don't hate myself that much.
I think you need to cultivate more self-loathing. It's great. Yeah, yeah. I hate having money. So get into Warhammer. It's just that's a wonderful antidote to that. Wait, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, plastic pile of shame. Pile of shame. That's a little bit of a term in the hobby because everybody has way more models that are unpainted than painted or things that are half painted. It's just like, you accrue things, you're like, oh, that's cool, I want that. Oh, that's cool, I want that, rather than, I don't think there's a single person out there, it's a lie, that has all of their models painted. Doesn't exist. I don't believe it. It's like Bigfoot, it's unicorn. You're not going to find that shit.
I mean, seeing as you've been to cons and you've seen people cosplay as various characters, have you ever thought about cosplaying as an ultramarine, or or is that just like too much?
First and foremost, it would be a blood angel because that is my chosen legion. Yes, I have thought about it, but like if I'm going to do that cosplay, I would be going ham and I'd be spending thousands of dollars on a really good one. If you're going to do it, you go all out, and I just cannot financially justify that. that one big lump sum, you know, yet. It'll happen eventually. I will get some space green armor, but it's not that time just yet. It'll happen eventually.
Yeah, magic of editing. Anyway, we were talking about Warhammer, and I was asking like,
Yes.
seeing as God, I hope I'm not sounding mean when I ask this, but how much money have you wasted on those on those figurines?
Yes. All of it. It's God, well, including everything. It's thousands of dollars at this point. Um, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, there's definitely like not to defend myself as well. It's like when it comes to a hobby, when we're exchanging our money, like, what are you getting out of it? What I like about these models is, I mean, I play video games too, and there's things, there's so many things that we spend our money on, and like, what do we get out of it? For like the models behind me, and many of the things that I'm working on, I invest time into it, and at the end, I have a product that I'm proud of, something that you can see the hours that I spent on it. There's not too many things, that you can do where that's the end result, and out of it, I get mental peace because that's one of the things that helps me just kind of flush everything out for the day. So I don't consider it a waste, and it's fun. I like to collect things. So for me, it just ticks all of my boxes. For some, it would definitely be a waste, but I do not regret my 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 investment. I'll say, but it's been a pretty significant chunk of change that I hope my wife never asks me about the nuances of.
And
Is that
I also got to ask, like, was there ever a moment where you had someone come over and they looked at your shelf and they're like, "You're into this, right?" And it's just like,
never in a bad way. It's like I've kind of gotten to the point where like my friends are of a similar mind, and it's just you know, if someone gives you shit for what you like, they're not really they don't really have a place in your circle or in your life. If whatever you like, it doesn't hurt anybody and it brings you joy, then enjoy it fully, and enjoy it responsibly. So like if somebody like I mean anybody who's been over here, I mean if like I've gotten some wide-eyed like wow that's a lot. I'm like it is. You want to see my favorite ones? So yeah, I'm like I'll go show and tell with you right now. Um, but I think it's also becoming like not that I don't really care. It's like cooler to be a nerd. Like people are, at least in my experience, caring less and less. It's just like you like what you like. Comic-Con, it's not even close to what it was anymore. Anime Expo, it's changing as well. All these big cons, they're just people are seeing how much money is in these worlds, so it's becoming a lot more hip to be nerdy. I mean, but I just I'm not hip. That's not me.
it's like I just God, I can just imagine you saying like, you know what? Do you know who my dad is? Of course of course I'd turn out to be a nerd.
Yeah. He's what is he? I guess he definitely nerds out over stuff too. Um, what does he nerd out over? Well, Pearl Jam. He loves like rock and roll documentaries, grunge band stuff like that. Yeah, he gets pretty hyper fixated. He plays. I don't even want to think how many hours of backgammon he's played on his mobile device, his iPad. Like he's addicted to backgammon. He nerds out over that hardcore like collecting sets and stuff, which you might not expect about him. But now he's doing a lot of stand-up comedy, so he like binges specials and takes notes and writes his own jokes and stuff. And now he's like, touring, doing stand-up. So when he chooses something, he focuses on that and nerds the heck out on it. So definitely.
So when did the whole, because I know that you're on TikTok and Instagram, like when did the whole Warburton family video start? Was that in like a collective idea, or was that just like something you thought, hey, that'd be kind of funny, let's do that?
Number two, for that one, like the first video I did was just it was shortly after my son was born, relatively a couple months. He's only 4 months old. Is that one? I'm like, it'd be kind of funny to hear my dad say something Argenti related, from Honkai. And so while he was feeding the baby, I'm like, hey, say this, and he's like, all right, So he did, and it was a really stupid, silly video, and it got like 1.2 million views. I'm like, oh shit. people really liked that, and then like, a week later it was Easter. I'm like, well, let's get the other brothers in on this, and that was just like we didn't really plan it out. It was like one take, like let's just do something silly. And we did. And now it's up to like almost 9 million views on TikTok, which is kind of crazy. It just kind of happened on a whim. And the support has been tremendous on that. It's really sweet to see, how many people are like, "Oh, I love this. It makes me so happy. This healed something in me." And I'm like, "Well, that makes me happy. If we're able to bring you joy." Like my dad, like Kronk specifically, but his work is so important to so many people. Like, Joe and Venture Brothers, Kronk, Putty, like all the stuff that people have a lot of warm feelings about what he's done and doing stuff together as a family. There's so much negativity out there in social media, on the news and the world. There's so much sad shit happening. I think people want that family element and the silliness and that bit of nostalgia. So right now we're trying to figure out how to continue to fill that need, in a genuine way, not just like, not trying to like recycle all the same shit over and over again, but like how do we provide that to people and still keep it fresh and stay true to ourselves and while still doing our own things. That's actually something that we're trying to figure out right now. We're having a big family, not big family talk. We're talking about that next week. See what we come up with.
Because I mean, he was also Buzz Lightyear, so I'm kind of shocked
That's true.
I'm kind of shocked there has not been any like Buzz Lightyear related shenanigans, but you never know.
It's on the list. We have a growing list of ideas. We got to figure out, what we're going to do with that. But yeah, he certainly has quite the library to draw from.
I was shocked that like, looking him up recently, like so I don't know who runs the social media account, but like someone he had posted I think like something from B movie and I'm like, "Oh God, he knows. He knows about the
He
memes."
knows. He knows about the memes. Yeah, no, he knows. He knows. They're good memes. They're quality memes.
What was his favorite meme? I gotta ask.
It's probably that one. I haven't asked him about it in a while, but if I had to guess, it would probably be something B movie related. So
And another thing that I don't know how you can trying to because I know this it's on your IMDb, so I'm pretty sure we can talk about this. Iron Man.
sure. Oh yeah, that just came
Yeah,
out. Yeah,
yeah. How did that whole thing come about? And did you was that an audition or was that a call in?
that was an audition. And the which is fun because it's a preschool show, so it's gonna be very fun for me because as my son's growing up, I'll be able to show him that show and be like, "Hey, look, Daddy's a bad guy," you know. So, that was an audition. I decided the character that I chose is actually I used my dad's vocal range. Sorry, I'm operating on baby sleep right now. My version of the character is I'm like, well, imagine my dad on 20 cups of coffee. Um, you know, he's very extreme and enthusiastic about things, and he tries to steal things and he absorbs things. It's an impression. I'm like, because I sent in a couple takes, and that's the one that they liked was like kind of my hyper impersonation of him because these kids shows are very larger than life. You still try to be somewhat grounded, but they like that exaggerated, especially for the bad guys. And I'm like, well, I can be silly and fun. So that was an audition that I did, and then and now we're filming. We're doing there's quite a few episodes of it that are going to be coming out. But yeah, sorry. Ooh, so sorry.
And did you guys record together on that, or was that like just separately?
Separately, it's just vast majority of everything is just separately these days.
Oh, so you didn't get to record with Tony Hale. That's kind of sad.
No, who does Tony play in that again?
He's Ultron. Yeah, he's
Ultron.
Ultron. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
Ultron.
I met Tony. We recorded a social media thing. I met the fellow villains for something that. Well, yeah, I think you might have seen the post. Like we were all together, but like we're not all in the booth together. But typically, so yeah, he's
Okay.
really cool. Very nice guy.
And seeing as you're working on a preschool show, how do you feel about the whole, you can't be too negative and you got to make everything you say clear because you're talking to preschoolers and they have to like be able to understand what you're saying.
Preschool shows are hard. They are hard. They require, like, I'm sweating by the end of those sessions because you got to keep the energy up. Like you said, you got to keep it clear. It's definitely a workout. It's a vocal workout. You always want to lean more, rather too big but still clear. It's much easier to bring somebody back down than to crank that knob up. Typically. So I always err on the bigger side, and if they need to bring me down, they'll bring me down. But it's a challenge, but I know that I'm helping teach valuable lessons, like don't steal shit. That's very bad, kids. This is what I do most of the time, in that show.
And did you base your take on Absorbing Man on a previous incarnation, or was it just like your own original take?
I didn't know it was Absorbing Man when I auditioned for him. Like, for a lot of superhero stuff, there's code names and code words for people. They give you a breakdown of the vibe that they want the character to be, but you don't necessarily know what character is specifically for projects like Marvel. Like, it's all going to be code names. Like big name projects, you don't always. Then they'll change some of the names and they'll change some of the terms and the places, so you don't know. But if you're like a super big nerd, you might know. Like, I auditioned for a Transformers movie a couple years ago, for one of the ones that came out a few years ago. I think it was actually the part that David Sobolov got in the Bumblebee movie. I knew it was Transformers when I was reading it, but they had changed like all the words and the names, like from Transformers to something else. It was like a different term in general, but I'm like, I know what this is. For a preschool show, it's a bit more muddled because, the stakes are different and the world's a little bit different. Like, a lot of this combat is going on at like a carnival or like the ice festival. So you don't necessarily know. You don't have the same clues to the same level. So I don't think I remember it being Absorbing Man. I think you had a code name, so I didn't have anything to base off of, just the description of the character.
Oh, that's interesting. I had no idea you auditioned for Bumblebee. That's an interesting bit of trivia.
Some Talon lore right there for you.
But that's the thing. It's like you're constantly auditioning for stuff and you don't know if you're gonna get it or not. And if and then when you see who got it, you're like, of course they're gonna cast Sobolov. Of course.
Oh my God, no, he's perfect, perfect. Like we read it, but there's certain things too. Like, for Megamind too, we both read for Lord Nighty-Knight, and I got that one and he didn't. Because like there was something that they liked about my performance. We were both. I mean, his voice is like, it's like way down here. Like there's certain things like you can kind of fall into a trap where it's like you got to understand that your fellow actor is not your competition. We're our peers. If somebody gets it, if one of your friends gets it, that's awesome. Because we got to raise each other up. Ultimately, who gets it is who's going to get it. The casting director. Some casting directors, is there favoritism? Yes, absolutely. That's not always the case. People like to work with who they like to work with, that they can trust. But it's different. It's different every time. So, but yeah, I mean, he was perfectly cast for that. So, I love that. Yeah. Sorry,
No, I mean,
I can talk.
yeah, I mean, he's great. Nice dude. Very
Oh,
nice
very
guy.
nice dude.
Yeah,
Very
very
nice
nice
dude.
guy. Very nice guy.
Very nice dude.
Um, and you also mentioned like, when we were previously talking, you also mentioned like you do what do you call it, Magic of the Gathering and D&D and all that other stuff.
Hmm.
Like, how long has that been going on for? Like, I'm kind of interested. They got me on, like, you got me interested on the lore now. I'm like, how deep does this go?
Magic the Gathering was relatively recently. It was after Warhammer because my buddy got me into it. He's like, there's a Warhammer Magic the Gathering set, and I'm like, God damn it. So I got it. I got the Imperium of Mandak, and then it was game over after that. Because the universe is beyond, which they're doing now. Now there's like SpongeBob and Spider-Man and Final Fantasy. There's like everything, for Magic. Magic is nerd golf. You have your decks instead of your clubs. You go, you sit, you play a few rounds. It can take the same amount of time. And I've met a lot of really cool people just playing Magic. And it's also an extremely freaking expensive hobby unless you proxy your cards, which, I mean, I collect shit, so I don't like to do that. I probably should. Um, but this is all relatively recently, like I've always been into the nerdy stuff, but I didn't really go ham into the nerdy stuff until shortly after college when I just really stopped caring what people think. I'm like, why do I care? I don't care. I like these things. I like these things. And if, if my friends don't like it or people don't, then I don't need them. I don't need that negativity.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I mean, it's like, who cares how much money I waste on this? It makes me happy, and that's all that counts.
well, no, I agree. I do. I agree 100%. If it makes you happy, as long as it's not like affecting other elements of your life, if you're trying to, you put stuff away if you can, which is harder and harder these days. If you're eating well and, taking care of all your other needs, nobody's going to stop me from spending my hard-earned adult dollars on my shiny plastic toys and resin and paints. I love that. I love that shit.
Okay, was there ever a point, because this happens with everybody who ever collects anything, was there ever a point where you're like, okay, this room is full, we need to get another room to for all this shit?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm not there yet, but I mean, that's a brand new. That bookshelf behind me, I found on the side of the road. I'm like, sweet, free bookshelf. Because before that, I had, oh, there we go. I had that one, and then I got that one, and now I just, I'm gonna definitely, I need to organize that space a little bit better. It's not as efficient as it could be. I'm
Buy
getting
it.
there.
Just buy a shitload of storage boxes and put all the stuff that you don't want to display in those storage boxes, and that's how you save room.
My God, I think you might be onto something.
Because I did that with my Transformers collection. I'm like, look, there are tons of toys I don't want to display. Just put them in storage boxes because I don't.
Well, there you go. See, you're a kindred nerdy spirit. You have your freaking collections too. There you go. How much money have you spent on your Transformers, sir?
Oh God, I'm just looking at the Transformers, the Funko Pops, the Amiibos, just like
Mhm.
all the weird stuff that I just bought to get signed. It's like I want this like
Throw
memorabilia.
a number at me. Throw a number at me. How much are we talking here? How much are we talking?
I mean, in total, like
Oh yeah.
counting inflation,
Oh
probably
yeah.
probably 20 grand in like today's US dollars.
Then how dare you insinuate that I'm wasting money on my Warhammer stuff right there, sir? You're high horse. You're on a sandcastle, a castle made of glass, sir. How dare you sling stones in this house? We are the same, you and I. Different worlds.
Oh man, that it's nothing compared to Daniel Ross's room because Daniel Ross's room is just like
Oh
littered with
yeah.
Transformers. Is like God, Lord.
Oh, I've seen it. It's insane. It's insane. That man is passionate. Yes. So there's some valuable ones in there too. I play
Because
poker with Daniel on occasion.
yeah, because I remember when I had him on the show and he like when I interviewed him a couple years ago and I just looked at his room, I'm like, are those the C-cons? And he's like, yep. And then he just gave me like a quick tour of all the stuff he had, and he's like, and even he said like, oh yeah, I have the HasLab Unicron, but it's like in a different room because it's too big, and I'm like, good Lord.
Passion. Passion.
And speaking of like personal hobbies, outside of like all the nerdy shit, do you have any personal hobbies that help keep you sane?
Fitness. I did get into bodybuilding a few years ago, and I got really into it. I actually competed once, but then I decided before I got like, really advanced in it, I'm like the amount of time it takes, like, and there were people that were, far more developed than I did. I'm like, I want to do it. I want to see how far I can get in a couple of years. Um, Scroll down my Instagram and see those thirst traps. They're there. But I think, fitness is still an important part of my life. It's hard to do as often as I'd like, with a baby and what have you. I think the human body is fascinating. I think that our capacity for change is fascinating. And I was a personal trainer while I was an actor. I was a personal trainer for about 7 years, different gyms, independent, because that's what I was using to, keep myself afloat because acting jobs are so sporadic. So that would be, I guess, one of my other major hobbies, other than like the painting and the 3D printing. Um, Whenever I can, not to sound too vanilla and basic, I love to travel. I don't know if I call that a hobby. It's a love of mine. I love to cook. I love to cook as well. I do. I love trying new recipes. I like trying multicultural, like what were the ones? Trinidad doubles. I found a web page with like a bunch of like Trinidad and Tobago recipes, and so I went to different stores, Los Angeles. You can get it whatever you want. So I got all those different ingredients that you can't find at Avon's, and I tried to make a bunch of traditional like Trinidad and Tobago recipes, and I think they came out pretty decent. But I like to cook foods from all over the world. I like to cook. I just like to cook. I love to cook. I love to cook for families and friends. So does that answer your questions?
I love it because you're constantly thinking about what you're gonna do next. It's like, I'm doing acting, I'm doing bodybuilding, I'm doing all this other stuff, I'm just like constantly moving and I like that, keeps you motivated, keeps your brain working.
It does. It does. I'm not really doing like I'm not as devoted to the bodybuilding anymore. Like devoted. I do have a new system that I'm trying to. I mean, the key with fitness is just finding something that you can be consistent with. Or as consistent as you can. A lot of people have a tendency to go super hard in the paint and then burn out. Yeah, I'm trying to find a system that works for me right now with my current availability, free time wise, balancing work-life balance, family, but um, I maintain that working out is the single best drug that you can provide for your body, best medicine for your mental health, and just so I'm a very strong. Obviously, I was a personal trainer for 7 years. Strong advocate of that. It's something that I do for my mental peace as well. Just
I'm not gonna lie, because like looking at a lot of your shirtless pics, I'm like, this is a, this dude is ripped. He's really good looking, and I'm kind of like, I'm kind of shocked he's not more on
stop it.
camera stuff.
Well, that's one of the things that drove me to try to get into that good shape too. And it's like, that a lot of that, a lot of that was pre-COVID, and everything shut down. It's like, but you never know. Like I am not nearly in that good of shape now, or that defined. That required a lot of chicken breasts, a lot of rice, a lot of kale. I love food too, and my wife bakes, and every morning I come down, there's probably cookies or some shit, and that that is so like how can I eat on a daily basis where I'm not like suffering? Like if I had to get ready for a shoot, I could dial it in and but that's not what you need to eat every day. It doesn't have to be miserable. So I'm trying to find that balance right now, but like also being understanding with myself. So no, I'm not the same size. I still consider myself in pretty decent shape and I'm not as big as I was. My goal is one of my goals is I want to get in the best shape of my life ever, even more than those photos by the time that I'm 35. And I know that I can do that if I'm just consistent. Like my buddy Bill Butts, he's enormous. He's enormous. He's built like a shit brick house. I mean, he's my strongest friend by far. And he's not on any of like the stuff, so to speak, but he is extremely consistent. And that's really the key is like I just got to make myself more consistent and find that balance. So
Yeah, man, I've seen those videos, man. I've seen him work out, and it's like, I truly believe that dude can crush a man's skull with his bare hands. Truly.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. But and yet cradle a butterfly, gently. He has that he's a very talented martial artist as well.
Yeah, and I remember like seeing what you call it, another I remember seeing Erica Ishii post like a video of her working out, and it's kind of crazy, just like her deadlifting, and it's like, shit, man. Like, you look,
There's some strong folks in the biz.
yeah, I mean, you look at that and you're like, I need to get my shit together. Like, truly, truly.
Well, you're also seeing the product of like years of a lot, like you're only seeing the highlight reel on social media, which is kind of like a double-edged sword. Like that people are only posting their best bits. They don't see the shit in between. Um, and I fall into that trap too, where I see that and I'm like, why am I not there right now? It's like, well, you don't know what went into this or how much dehydration. Like how do they? This is how much staging, how much lighting. There's so many things that go into play for a lot of these like influencers, like the really. I was watching a video too, like the Superman, Man of Steel, Henry Cavill, that famous like shirtless scene where he's coming out of the water and just go, shredded. He prepared like a bodybuilder for that one scene, which required a lot of controlled dehydration. Like most people don't look that peeled unless you are very dehydrated. And then if you before you get on stage for a bodybuilding show, you've been dehydrating for like weeks. And then the last thing that you do is you do some push-ups and shit. You eat some Sour Patch Kids because that flood of simple sugars pumps up all your muscles, sucks all the moisture, out from underneath your skin and vacuum seals everything. And you look the best you've ever looked for about an hour or two. And then it's gone again. The definition at least, but I don't even know how I got onto that tangent. But yeah. Um,
No, no, man. I mean, I hear you. Like, cause every time I think about losing weight, I'm like, yeah, maybe I should try doing this and doing that. And then it's like, you look this stuff up, and it's like, I'm sorry, you want me to do what now? Fucking hell.
well, no, it doesn't require that much. So I'm, trying to cut a little bit as well right now. Ultimately, it's like operating on a caloric deficit. Certain meal substitutions, like trying to do things that are more calorically dense, not calorically dense, like nutritionally dense, but not as caloric, and just walking. A lot of people underestimate just how powerful walking is. Like getting 10,000 steps a day for weight loss in particular is insane. If you just keep track of those steps, but it's just not sexy. It's not sexy. But there's no way. It's like, oh, yes, there absolutely is. The chosen form of a lot of bodybuilders, cardio, is just walking incline on a treadmill, and they just do that for a long time. But walking, yeah, walking. But I'm also somebody who loves food, so finding that balance of things that are not, tricky.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is tough. And it's like, you got to be
It
good.
is.
And like I said, you got to be in good shape if you want to get cast and stuff. And if you want to play an intimidating character, they're not gonna cast like a skinny dude.
Nope. Yeah, and that's particular. So I'm 6'4", and that's I'm a pretty big guy. I'm a pretty big guy, but I'm also like right now I'm not as built as I used to be, which eliminates me from certain roles that I wanted to audition for. It's like you try to find excuses for yourself. It's like, why am I not getting cast in these things? It's like, well, I'm not getting cast as the bouncer anymore because I don't have the exact build of a bouncer anymore. So how do I get that back, or do I want that? I don't know, man. It's hard. It's really hard. And also when you're tall, everything's stretched out, so it takes a lot longer to put on the necessary muscle. I mean, I'm not going to complain. I've chosen this life, and I enjoy it. But it does require a lot of devotion and discipline and sorting out that I need to sort out right now if I want to get back to that physique to get the roles that I want to get.
Yeah, because I remember watching videos of you on Instagram, and you're standing next to people, and I was like, yeah, I keep forgetting he's a tall dude.
And yeah. Not my wife. It's funny. My wife is like 5 foot, so we look quite hilarious next to each other.
And the last thing I want to talk about before I let you go, because I know that you're, you're on daddy time, and you gotta you got other more
On
important
daddy
things to
time.
do. Yeah. Well, one last thing I want to talk about is seeing as you've been doing, you're dipping your toe into the convention scene. How is that
Mhm.
experience like, and what is it like meeting the fans for the first time?
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I got my first my first say fan related experience. I started doing the Twitch, and people followed me because they liked my character, they liked what I did. And it's a weird sensation because this is new for me. I'm not really, used to it. Conventions was weird because I think, I did my first convention close to a month ago, and they provided somebody an assistant to handle her, and she was absolutely wonderful, to ask for the money. I'd have a really hard time asking for it. I feel like I'm stealing or doing something criminal asking somebody for money for my freaking signature. I'm like, why would I mean, I know I'm not a freaking big name celebrity. I'm a, like, it's weird to ask for money for something that I signed or like a video or something. There's something that feels kind of dishonest about that. I have pretty gnarly imposter syndrome, and I'm trying to climb that ladder in the industry. I'm trying, and I am, book more and more parts, but it was a weird sensation. So I'm like, well, I try to give, so I would try to give free photos and videos and stuff like that because if my work meant that much to somebody, I want, because if you're in the industry, if you're an actor, you owe everything to the people that like your characters. You owe everything to the fans, so you have, you gotta, I feel very grateful, very, very grateful to the people that, have reached out to me and that love my work. So it's wonderful. It's a wonderful treat. It's a wonderful gift to be able to meet these people. at conventions. You know, I met somebody who drove all the way out from Arizona. Um, that was crazy. You know, when I was in California, I'm like, they drove like 8, 10 hours, to come to this to meet me. And I'm like, it's very humbling. And it's very inspiring. And it's like, well, if my material, my work means this much to somebody, I must be doing something right. So that's definitely fuel for moving forward and keep doing what I'm doing.
And do you plan on doing any more conventions down the line?
Oh yeah, I got a couple coming up. I
All
don't know
right.
if I'm allowed to talk about this because I haven't fully signed the contract for one, and I have a tentative signing coming up in June. So two things lined up. I just have to fully confirm those, but definitely have some more stuff coming.
All right. And before we wrap this up, can you give us an update on what you're currently working on and where can people find you online?
What I'm currently working on. I think we might have an episode or two more of Iron Man and his awesome friends. The Honkai is Argenti. He comes and goes as he pleases. So hopefully they bring him back soon. I don't have anything currently slated for him coming up, but he'll hopefully be coming back at some point in the near future. The strike is going on right now, and there was a game that I was working on, and all I can really say is right now we're still not working on that game. Hopefully, we get back to working on that game soon. I just recorded something for a very cool major show, animated. That's all I can really say, and hopefully, that's going to be out early next year. I decided I'd love for that game to. I'd love for some stuff to happen with that because it's a wonderful game. I get to put on the suit. It's motion capture. There's photos of that on my Instagram. It's my first like major motion capture role. It's very near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about that work. That's what I'm working on right now. If people want to find me, it's just you could find Talon Warburton on its Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days, TikTok. My old TikTok still exists, and I can't figure out how to delete it. But just do the Talon Warburton one that has more followers than the other one. Um, so that's where you can find me. I guess I should probably make a YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for taking the time off to do this. This has been a wonderful conversation. And if you ever want to come back, you know where to find me.
That I do. I really appreciate you reaching out and having me. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, maybe once a few more of my some new stuff comes out, we can talk more about that. But I really enjoyed today, so thank you. Thank you
All
for
right.
reaching
Thank
out.
you. Take care. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
you too. Bye bye.